Well, Natalie, hey, I'm just so excited. You and I have gotten to know each other over the last couple of months, probably almost like a year and a half now, maybe two
Yeah.
years. And it's been fun getting to know you and your husband. We all get to work together on an event coming up. And we got to work together on the Thrive Today launch, which this was massive hybrid event launching a brand new brand that was, well, it's more like a relaunch, right? Where
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
people knew about it, some people didn't. And I know that you and I could talk for days about that event. So I'm just so thankful you're here for our listeners and for if they're watching this on YouTube for mic drop events. And because that truly, there was a couple of mic drop moments. You had some mic drop statements where I was like, she needs to drop that mic. I remember taking a picture behind the scenes and sending it to your husband, Aaron. I was like, Natalie is just crushing it on the stage. And so I'd love to hear for the listeners and for the watchers, like what are some of the things that you top of mind for you when you think back to the Thrive Today event that were like, man, we just knocked it out of the park for that event?
Yeah. So, hey, Sean, and all of your listeners out there, man, that event was so much fun. Like, I got to be honest, I was super nervous. I had never done a hybrid event on that scale before. And so, as we were looking at the event and at the registrations, we knew that we had over 1,000 people signed up online. And that was exciting and also terrifying because we're like last minute buying Zoom seats and all these things just to make sure we were prepared for everybody. And, in the bum rush, right, that was coming. And so it was such a fun event because constantly, and I think this is so important just as we think about the future and where the future is going, is constantly thinking about not only the in the room experience, which we think about a lot, but then how does that actually translate online? And are we engaging the people online? Are we drawing them in? Are we giving them a reason to not multitask, walk away from the screen? But are we engaging them so well that they're right there in it with us? And so we reached out to you guys for help, and you guys gave us so many moments where we could engage our audience, where we could pause, talk to them. It was really cool. We had this huge TV up behind us, and even a couple of times we were able to bring someone's face up on that and have them ask us a question, and everyone in the room got to hear it. And that was just a great connection moment to tie it all together. So it's just a fun event, and we are still just hearing really good things about that event because we thought through all those pieces with you guys, and I don't know how we would have done it without y'all. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Those are mighty high compliments. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. And that was a really fun planning process leading up to it where we said, okay, we've got these, we had about 250 people in the room with us
Yeah.
in an auditorium, stage, lighting, cameras. And then
Yep.
we were like, okay, well, how do we, number one, make it secure so that we don't get any Zoom bombers,
Yes.
which is a real thing. Like you have
Yeah.
to worry about stuff like that nowadays. And so that was one trick
Yeah.
was how do we like engage the online audience, but then also how do we make it safe? So we did have some people on Zoom, but then we were still using that Zoom feed and then streaming to, Facebook to YouTube.
Yep.
I think it was like 14 different platforms you guys told us afterwards. And
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite parts about it afterwards was going back to the Facebook and the YouTube, which we weren't really even paying attention to
Right.
during the event, but going back online after the event ended and seeing, oh wow, like there were people that were commenting as if like we could see them and we could talk with them and engage with them, which was super powerful. So I'm curious to know from have you seen any like comments or have you guys gotten any feedback or had because this was also a brand launch, right?
Yes.
Like you guys were launching a brand, you were hoping that women would sign up for this new leadership program that you guys have going on. So have you seen an ROI from that event?
Absolutely. So, what was so amazing was part of what we launched out of that was so Thrive Today. They're really doing a subscription model where you can sign up monthly and you get all this cool stuff in the mail, whether it's like, a magazine or a book or name it, right? And then they have these coaching calls. So really that was the launching point into Colleen Rouse's platform to be able to coach and engage and interact with all these people. So she had wonderful signups coming out of that event, which was really cool. And as a marketer at heart, I don't know that I would have said, "Hey, let's do this big event so that you can, kick off your brand." And there's so many different ways you can do it, but it was really just this very high crescendo moment. Especially at the end, we had this incredible balloon drop, which actually also came off really brilliantly online. To really kind of kick off this brand and say, hey, they're open now, they're ready for you, and take that next step to be a part of it. So I just thought there were so many great moments there. And even the way that we set up the Zoom, like thinking through that whole experience of how we were going to do it for safety. I can tell you this, I've been on a call where someone was Zoom bombed, and it was not enjoyable. It was awful, actually. And so, there were so many elements, whether it's safety and security of the people that are going to be, online with us, whether it was thinking through their experience and how were they going to interact with us through the whole thing. All those things are so important so that they walk away from that event feeling like it was tailor-made for them, even if they weren't in the room with us.
And I think that's really important too. One thing that you talked about, and that was definitely part of our goal, was to make it personal to people in the room and make it personal to the people online, as well as making it a great experience for both. So I love that you brought up the balloons that were dropping, which was super fun. And like, if you're listening to this or watching this, what happened is we had, I don't know. Do you remember how many balloons?
Oh my goodness. It was like it had to be 1,000. I'm probably exaggerating, but it felt like there was 1,000 balloons in there. And it was cool because we actually shaped some of the balloons. So if you've ever seen the Thrive Today brand, it looks like a big exclamation mark, and then it has like a dot at the bottom. So some of the balloons look, actually kind of likened to the logo, which was really cool too, and kind of had the same colors as the logo when we did that piece of it. Yeah.
And it was bright, it was colorful, it was fun. And what's cool is like in the room, the people got to like feel the balloons falling like on their heads. And then what happened is the way that the cameras were positioned is the balloons fell like almost right in front of the cameras too.
Right.
Which made it this really cool celebratory experience.
Well, and what was amazing, so the events team that did this, they are just incredible, but it was literally like right overhead. So earlier that day, we're seeing them get up on this massive lift, and like somebody's going up there to like tie it to the ceiling. And then we had to like pull it at the exact right time. But the way that the cameras were positioned, to your point, it looked like balloons were falling all over the room. And it literally was just in that one spot, but it created such a cool effect for the people that were watching online. And I loved just playing it back and watching that very moment.
Agreed. And I think that's an important thing for people to remember too, is like, you can do these things in such a way that it makes the people in the room feel like, oh, wow, this is really cool. And then it makes this cool visual statement that's happening online for the people that are watching. So I think that's one of my definite favorite parts of it. And then I think my other favorite part through planning and the production of the event was the different moments where, because we had you who were on stage and you were the on stage facilitator.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had Kate Lord, which shout out to Kate. I feel like we need to 3 get on one of these podcasts.
I know, she's so amazing.
She is. That'd be so fun. And we had her standing next to the Zoom wall. So we had a TV on the stage, and we had people on Zoom so we could see that they were on Zoom and they could see that they were on Zoom. And so it was this really cool where like you were asking Kate, like, hey, Kate, do we have any questions from Zoom? And hey, Kate, do we have any questions from in the room?
Yeah.
And it was alternating between both. Tell the people that are listening, like, what was that like to be on stage and to have that interaction of both online and in person?
You guys are the ones that gave us that idea. So thank you for that, because you can't underestimate when you're hosting the people on a panel, like that brain switching that has to take place. So what I think was so great about Kate and I getting to work together to facilitate both the room and the panel is, I came prepared to talk to the panel and make sure that the panel, knew what questions I was going to ask and knew how to project to the room. But then there was this whole other element taking place of, hey, we need to warm up the crowd, both in the room and online, before we even walk out. So Kate did an amazing job of facilitating conversation and games and just keeping that crowd warm, and also telling them, hey, when the panelists come out, like, let's give some energy in the room so that the people online know, like, there's people here and we're in this together. And so it just created this really cool element. And so, it's interesting because I think before it would have been kind of like, how do we do this where we've got people online and in the room? And the fact that we were able to facilitate both was just an amazing experience.
Yeah, I think that was so fun. Not only just talking about it and ideating about it, but then also like seeing it come to life. And I think you and Kate both did an amazing job of just naturally interacting with each other.
Mm-hmm.
with the panelists that were on the stage, with the people that were in the audience, and the people that are on Zoom, which that's a lot of different groups of people that you got to interact with.
It was. And so that's, I feel like, something I do by day trade as a consultant and facilitator is I'm always facilitating meetings. So, there's something so great. I think you get to this place as a facilitator where it's not about you anymore. It's you're thinking about the audience. And I think when, my early days facilitating, it was so much about, okay, am I saying the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Am I standing in the right place at the right moment? And it's a wonderful thing to kind of get over yourself and be thinking about the people that are in the room and what they're experiencing. There was actually one point when someone in the audience asked a question, and it was neat just to stop and stare out into the audience and look at different people's faces and be like, man, what if I was in their shoes asking this question? What would I want to know? What would I want to hear? And just being able to switch that from, oftentimes when we're presenting or when we're speaking, it's about, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And it was just this cool moment to be able to look out and be like, how are they doing? And I think when you have someone carrying the load with you, like I did with Kate, it's easier to switch those moments on and to just look out and say, we're doing this so that the people in the audience and online can receive value. And I'm here to make sure that they receive the value that they're hoping for by coming to this event. It's just a neat switch. And when we have people sharing the load with us, it's easier to have those moments where we can really just connect in with our audience by just truly looking out there and looking them in the eye.
I think that's so powerful and important because sometimes I think as event producers, we forget to pause and allow, maybe it's the people that we're helping to facilitate the event, or maybe it's even ourselves, to actually enjoy the fact that like the event is happening.
Yeah.
The people are in the room. And I'll never forget when my wife and I were planning on getting married, one of the pieces of advice that we got was someone told us like, hey, at your wedding reception, just the two of you, like go to the side of the room or the back of the room where all of your guests are together and just pause for a couple minutes and just take in everything that's going around, which I think is important for us to do as event professionals. So if maybe you don't have event planning in your job title or event planning your job description, but you do events, maybe you're an HR manager or your marketing manager, because you and I think we're both marketers at heart. You mentioned that. I am too. And it's important for us to always remind ourselves, even if we have that in our job title, but to still stop and go back and like say like, just like enjoy the fact that it's going on. And that allows us to then, as you said, like see the people in the audience, see that like they're smiling or see that their heads are nodding while this one person is talking. So I think that's super important. And I think one thing that made it powerful for us is I remember the very first planning meeting with the other side of the production team that was there is we were actually sitting in like the auditorium in the seats where the other people were going to be sitting. Yeah. And we were talking through these different elements and we're like, well, they're going to be over here and you're going to be up here. And then we went and we like stood over here and that kind of thing, which was super helpful. Do you agree? Do you think that was helpful that we did that?
It does. I think it's so important to, whether you're putting on an event, to walk the room, to think about the experience. We even, I think day of, moved some of the tables around because we were like, this is going to be a bad experience. This person is going to be blocked from really seeing what's going on. So even in the moment, just looking at the room and saying, what's the best experience? And are we giving people the right experience? And if we're not, like, change it. And I think, not being afraid to make changes even day of, if you feel like we're not giving the right experience to the people that are coming, because ultimately, we remember experiences, and experiences motivate us. They influence us. They excite us. And so being able to give people an experience is so important. And so, we shouldn't be afraid in that moment to say, this is not going to be a good experience. Let's step through this and figure out where can we see people and where can we see things so we can give a really powerful experience to everyone that's with us, not only there, but also online. And so thinking through those camera angles, thinking through where we place things, how they get placed, why they're placed there. I think it's so important to ask ourselves, why am I doing this? And does what I'm doing matter? And if not, let's change it.
Well, and I think that that's a perfect segue into something else that you and I really wanted to talk about when we were hitting the record button, which is you're talking about like the audience and like why they're there, right? And one of the things that we were talking about before we went live is the fact that, so this was a hybrid event, which you and I are in agreement. I don't think that hybrid events are going away. what's interesting in the last 2 days, so I was in Atlanta, Georgia in our studio, and I helped produce a virtual event. So it was from our studio, like just a couple of people in the production team, and then we broadcast to literally all over the world. There was people in South Africa, there was people in the United Kingdom, people in the United States. It was super cool. And then I drove to Nashville later that day. And then the next day we had an in-person only event. But this event that we're talking about, this was a combination of online and then in person in the room, broadcast online, which I know that you and I were just talking about the fact that that's a hybrid event.
Yeah.
And you're doing a lot of work, not just in the event space, but also just in the leadership and in the workforce space.
Mm-hmm.
And so one thing that you were saying that you're pretty passionate about is how the world is changing and the world has changed, and we're moving towards a hybrid workforce. And so it's important for us to remember as employees, as well as coworkers, that the world has changed and the way in which we interact with someone else has changed. So my question for you is we were talking about this phrase, like when we go back to normal, right?
Yeah.
What do you think we're going to go back to normal, or do you think that this is our new normal?
I definitely think this is our new normal. And so depending on what industry you're in, you may hear certain people, especially if they're in a little bit of an older industry, maybe banking, things like that, maybe even ministry, you may hear this phrase over and over again where people are saying, well, once we get back to normal, and then they complete the sentence. And one of the things I think is so important to understand is that this is probably going to be our new normal for a while. And a lot of people have, especially our knowledge workers, people that just have a specific skill set in an area, they've had this realization that I can work not even from home, but I can work from anywhere. And so if I can work from anywhere, you're hearing this mass exodus of people moving to Florida and Hawaii right now, because the realization that my skills are my skills and I can do this from anywhere. Well, that's going to translate into companies and our ability to hire people. We're seeing now shortages in certain industries. So we got to go where the work, where the people are. And so if that means I hire someone in Hawaii or hire someone in California, even though I'm in Atlanta, because that's the best person for the job, well, that's our new normal now. So now I have to think about how to incorporate them into a hybrid workforce, hybrid events, hybrid kickoffs, right? Like everything we do now, we have to have that hybrid hat on. And so, back in the day, right before COVID, we would come into a meeting room and we'd be like, talking for 10 minutes and we'd be like, oh my gosh, we forgot to call Sean. And then we would call Sean and be like, sorry, man, we've already been talking for 10 minutes. Let us catch you up. Well, that's the old way now. The new way is that everything we do, we're thinking about our remote workforce. We're thinking about who they are, where they are, and how we can ensure they have a good experience from the very beginning, which means they're already waiting for us in the room when we walk in, not, oh my gosh, we're 10, 15 minutes in, we forgot to call Sean. So I believe that that's the way that work is going across the country, across the world. And so oftentimes, we're kind of late to the party to get in on what everyone else is realizing, but this is our new normal. And so as we create events and as we create kickoffs for the beginning of the year, it's natural now. We need to be thinking, how do we do this in a hybrid way?
And I think that that's important because there's a lot that we can learn by crossing over industries and crossing over experiences. Like what we experienced at Thrive today very well could be applied to, say, a board meeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like let's say you have 12 different board members for your nonprofit or for your company, and 4 of them can't be there in person, but the other 8 can, right?
Yeah.
Like how do you account for that? How do you design for that? And not only that, but maybe sometimes you get all of them together, and maybe sometimes it's 4 of them live in a different state and 8 of them live there together in the state that you're in. And so it's just you now with this hybrid type model, you can step your game up, so to speak, and you can, number one, make it a great experience for both, where you're not just playing catch up,
right?
where it's like, oh yeah, we were doing this, and oh, we gotta include them. Like that's not the goal. That will still probably happen, but what you can do is you can kind of we can step our game up and say, now that we have hybrid and now that we have online as tools to use, like let's say you're a company, for example. Here's like a practical example. Mm-hmm. And what I think you're saying is that In a company, normally they would say, okay, let's get everybody together in the room together to have this meeting, right? And maybe if you were scattered, maybe you just have people that are just out and about and they are franchisees or something and you want to get them together. Well, with hybrid and with virtual, you can do it more often than you normally could with somewhat of a lower cost. Now, of course, there's like the Zoom wall cost and like the different AV features that you might need.
Right.
But there's definitely the ability to not have to fly someone in, because one thing that you said right at the beginning was that when we were talking beforehand is you don't have to have that instinct to just like jump on a plane. No, you can just jump on Zoom. Right.
Right. Well, it's interesting as you think about planning these meetings, as we think about planning meetings for, let's go back to that boardroom for a second. Part of what we're having to do now as we think about the fact that 4 out of 8 of the people on the board are going to be online is we have to think online first. It's kind of like this, I'll use a technology example, right? Where we all were saying mobile first, right? Well, for this space, we now need to think online first. So that means, how am I going to get my content to them? Can I get the content in advance, right? Oftentimes we share something on the screen and the people in the room are like, oh, I can't see it. It's too, so you kind of have all the weird stuff of half the people looking at a screen, half the people on a screen. How do you deal with that? So it's almost like, if I have content I want people to review, let's review it in advance so that we come ready to have a lively discussion that engages everyone. Something that is also so important, and I'll kind of pull from my facilitator hat, is, when we have people online, I defer to them first. So I want to talk to the people online first before I talk to the people in the room, because the people in the room can always jump in and kind of interrupt, but it's a little bit more of a nuance online, right? It's almost like double dutch and you don't know where to get in. And so you have to draw them out and actually say, hey, I'd like so-and-so online to go first. Let me hear what you have to say, and then let's discuss that in the room. So it requires you to facilitate things a little bit more specifically so that you can ensure that everyone's voice is heard, which is what's really important about a meeting anyway, and why we have a meeting face-to-face is because we want to hear what everyone has to say, we want to connect, and we want to make sure that the voices in the room are heard. So we need to actually facilitate that now, because it's easy to forget that someone's online. On their side, we're asking them, turn cameras on, show us that you're engaged. We know to call on you, we know to pull you in because we can see you, we can see your face. And so cameras on their side, and us facilitating that conversation so that we're drawing them in, sending out content in advance so we can just have a really good conversation, not try to figure out all the technology and am I sharing, am I not sharing? That stuff is secondary to having a really good conversation.
I think that that's super important, what you're talking about, because it applies not just to like the meeting also, but also to the events. Like we very easily could have just facilitated the event for the people in the room at the Thrive Today launch and just ignored everyone online.
Right.
But one thing that we specifically did is we designed the event so that we had certain segments where we said, no, we're going to go to the people online and we're going to ask them a question. And what's fun is it all of a sudden, like you would see this spark of people online where they were like, oh, they were kind of like sitting up a little bit straighter because they were on camera. And it was interesting, this dynamic, but we made it a point and we had a clear plan. And I love what you're talking about, which is retraining our brain. And if I'm a facilitator, like what you were talking about, maybe I'm going to have a conversation, and if I were to be like more of a newer facilitator, I might focus on the people that are more outspoken and they're easy to jump in. And I think one of the things that marks a great facilitator is what you're talking about, that ability to draw out people who are more introspective, who maybe don't speak up right away. They're not quite as bold, but they have amazing ideas and amazing insights and amazing thoughts. And so now it's just adding that, instead of it's the quiet person at the back of the room, the quiet person in the back of the room really could be a boisterous person online.
Yes.
And the quiet person that's online as well.
Yeah. So I want to give you a couple of tips since we're talking about this.
Let's do it. Let's go.
It could be really fun/funny. So if I'm dealing with people in the room that are a little bit overly dominant and are kind of sucking up all the air and taking up all the conversation, and you're just like, man, I just need to get in. So something as a facilitator I like to do, you'd be really surprised. the closer you get to someone, the earlier they'll finish their sentence. So you got to create a little bit of uncomfortableness by walking into their bubble, so to speak, and just standing there and waiting for them. Because sometimes you do have that one person that it feels like they've been talking for 30 minutes and it's an hour-long meeting. And so by actually walking over to them, it actually creates a little bit of a barrier of like, oh, I need to stop talking, without you even having to tell them, hey, so-and-so, can you stop? It actually just does it automatically. The other thing that's really interesting is, and if you have to vocally say it, you could say, hey, Sean, thank you so much. I really value what you're saying, but I haven't heard from Sarah and I haven't heard from Bob. So Sarah and Bob, could you be ready? I'm coming to you in just 1 second, and I'd like to know, what do you think about this change we're going to make? And so it acknowledges that I hear you, but it also acknowledges that I'm not getting to hear the other people that are online that maybe aren't speaking up because it's a little bit harder to be heard. So I use that a lot, of just either using space as a physical barrier to be like, oh, maybe I should stop talking right now. It's like, yes, please do. Or, just saying, look, thank you so much. I need to hear from some other people in the room now. So let me hear what Bob, what Sarah have to say, because they've been really quiet.
And I think it's interesting too, because I don't know if you feel this way, but I, at least sometimes, I feel really comfortable sharing something like in the chat of the online thing, especially if there's just a lot going on.
Yeah.
And so I'm not an introverted person, so I can't really put myself into the mindset. But I can imagine that it would be easier to also say, hey, Bob or Sarah, I would love to hear your thoughts. So if you don't want to share on video or share on audio, you can type it into the chat and share that way. And that can be a way that we can draw people out as well. Would you say that that's a something that could be done, or what?
I love that, because you don't want to put someone on the spot, but you desperately want to hear what they have to say. You're chomping at the bit for it, because you know that they have to be thinking things. You've been in this meeting for a while. We want to hear what you have to say. And I love that, because what it also does is you have to create space to then read that, right? To read that out and make sure you're incorporating that into your discussion. So I love the idea of, hey, Sarah, Bob, I'm going to check chat in about 5 minutes. I would love if you could share your thoughts on that. It gives them time to put their thoughts together. They're not immediately put on the spot. They can share it in, and then you could say in 5 minutes, hey guys, let's go into the chat and let's read out what everyone has to say and let's discuss that. And so you constantly are looking for ways to connect with them. The goal is not to put them on the spot or embarrass them, but you're looking for ways to connect to them so that they're part of the conversation. But it does require you're probably going to feel, if you've never done this before, really exhausted when you leave the meeting, because you truly are almost like the traffic controller. You're helping all the cars to come in and the planes to fly out, and you're just making sure that traffic is flowing properly so people's thoughts and feelings are heard before you actually, land the plane, so to speak.
It's so good. That's so good. And I mean, I had this mental image of like herding cats, right? And I actually did this for some other project I was working on, but there was like 2 images, and it was like this is like, I think it was a cartoon graphic, and it was like a man and a woman they were each on horses, and they had like literally cats like around them, like trying to herd them while they're on these horsebacks, and they're just everywhere.
Yes.
And then the other image that I had is, because that's a lot like sometimes what some of our events or our meetings are like, because everyone has their own agenda.
Yes.
Like if you bring together someone from finance and someone from the product team, or someone from marketing and someone from sales and someone from the executive team, like everyone's got their own little agenda for when they're coming together. Or if you're doing an event, same kind of thing. But then the other image that I had is, I found this picture online where it was this street, and it was kind of an uphill street, but on each side there was like a wall, and it was a nice setting. It wasn't like a really claustrophobic, it was pretty wide, but it was a 5K. And it was people all running towards the finish line. And what's interesting is like each of those is its own cat. It could be like seen as herding cats, but they're all running in the same direction. And I don't know why, but I had that mental image in my head where sometimes that's what we're trying to do. Like we're trying to draw out something and get all of the cats to do something. I don't know why I'm stuck on calling people cats right now, but you know what I'm trying to say. So yes.
Yeah, it's funny though, what you're saying is so wise, because I even at so I used to work at Intercontinental Hotels Group in corporate, and I was in the IT area, and we got to this point where people were having meaningless meetings and not very good meetings. And so we put out this rule that if a meeting didn't have an agenda, you don't have to come. And it's like, oh, okay. So now we're forcing people to think through the why. Why am I having the meeting? What were you gonna
Wow.
say?
Well,
Yeah.
I'm just like that. I'm like, I feel like there's going to be like 15 people at least that adopt that method. They're like, that's genius.
They're
And
like,
I
well,
want that.
yeah. Well, because to me, it's so powerful to say, if you're going to ask for my time, you have to tell me what we're doing and why we're doing it. Help me know where we're going. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier about the agendas, right? Because everyone's walking into a meeting with their own agenda. Well, I hope we cover this. Well, I hope we cover that. And now you have people almost like rowing in different directions, which bust the boat apart in a meeting. And so that's when the meeting erupts and people are off on different pages. And now you feel like you're herding cats. You haven't set the expectation of why I'm there in the first place and what do you need from me. So I love the idea of agenda out your meeting. Tell people in advance what role you'd like to play. Sean, I'd like you to play the contrarian in this meeting. I don't know if this is the right product to bring to market. I don't know if this is the right event to have. Could you come to this meeting and just play the contrarian? Help me hear it from a different point of view. Or I need you in this meeting because you're a subject matter expert and you are so bright in this area. Could you just school us? Certain times I'm just going to hand it over to you. Just school us and tell us what we should be doing because I don't know how to get past this segment right here. And so having an agenda, telling people what role they're going to play, it keeps everyone on track. And it is like herding cats, but now they're all running in the same direction. I love that analogy because you can do that if you give people rails. And oftentimes we don't give people rails. And I'll tell you what, if I go to a really bad meeting, I'm probably not going to go back again.
Yeah.
And so I have been to some horrible ones where I'm like, that's an hour of my time I will never get back.
Well, and I love what you said that like we can get people moving the same direction if we give them rails, as well as we can give them a destination, like something
Yeah.
to work towards together or even work towards individually. So
Yeah.
I love what you just wrapped up there. Well, Natalie, this has been an amazing conversation. It's been so fun. I feel like we could talk about this kind of stuff for another 3 hours, but if you're listening to this, I just wanted to encourage you to check out Natalie on all the social media channels. So you can find her on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Innovation Meets Leadership. On Twitter, Natalie M. Born, which is her last name is Born. And you can, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can click on the description of the video. I'm going to put links down there. On podcast, you can find it in the show notes. And in just a second, Natalie, I'm going to give you the opportunity to drop the mic because we're on Mic Drop events. So you get to leave us with a final statement. But I do want to shout out some of your accolades from your bio because Natalie is the founder and podcast host of Innovation Meets Leadership and the vice president of innovation for Territory Global. And then prior to the innovation consulting, she was the senior vice president of business development at a MarTech firm and an accomplished executive with accomplished executive with 2 approved U.S. patents under her belt. 2 patents under your belt? I didn't even know that. That's awesome. That's a whole nother conversation. Let's go. That's awesome. And over 15 years of experience leading a product development team. She's a keynote speaker, podcaster, and innovation facilitator. And Natalie, this has been such a joy and a pleasure. So for our listeners, for those watching this, what's maybe a mic drop statement as we talk about the future of events, the future of work, hybrid, online, all the kinds of things? What's kind of like something you can leave us with?
Yeah. So because you said I'm an innovator facilitator, which I am, I want to leave you with an innovation thought. And that is this, as you think about the hybrid and future events and where things are going, part of what we miss sometimes is we're always trailing where we should be. But true event innovators, they think out into the future and they go to places, they gamify things, they create events that people talk about for months and years to come. So, as you're listening to this podcast, which is such an amazing podcast and platform, really think about not what are people doing today, but what could I be doing in the future that no one else is doing, that's innovative, that stands out, and that creates an amazing experience. Because at the end of the day, people come to you because you add value to their life. So do that in a way where you're not just following the crowd, but you are actually creating the content and you're creating the experience that you want people to have.
So good. So good. I love that with all my heart. This is like top of mind for me because you're talking about like doing something that you can stand out, but also like something that the reason why people come to you as value. There's in the Goofy movie, it's like one of my favorite Disney songs of all time. It's called Eye to Eye. So if you've never heard the song, go to Spotify or someplace and look up like the letter I, the number 2, and the letter I. And it's like, stand out above the crowd. I'm like, I'm an awful singer, so it sounds way better than that, but it's a fun song. So Natalie, this was amazing. Thank you so much for being here with us. And if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, you can also go to her website, which is innovationmeetsleadership.com, as well as find her on social media at Innovation Meets Leadership on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Natalie, it's been so fun.
Yes, thank you for having me, Sean. This was amazing. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Well, Natalie, thanks again, and we'll chat later.
See you later.